Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Drew Rubin, and I am here with Disruptive Pediatrics. Today, we're going to have a very, very special guest, Tom Myers, the author of the phenomenal book, fourth edition now, Anatomy Trains. Thank you so much, ChiroSecure, for bringing this to you guys. I think it is so important to have more and more pediatric information out there, and ChiroSecure is certainly supporting pediatrics and chiropractic, so I appreciate that. Let's go to the slides right now. Um, like I said, I want to thank ChiroSecure and I want to thank Tom Myers for being our special guest. This is so amazing. I don't know how many of you guys have actually seen or read anything about anatomy trains, but I want to share this with you guys because it is another one of these mind-blowing, revolutionary things that I love talking to you and bringing this information to you. So the old way, if you all remember when we went to anatomy classes, we were taught like, here's the bicep and the bicep does this, and this is just how the bicep works, and it pulls the skeleton in a certain way. And this is what they call the single muscle theory. And this image in this picture here represents the muscle with analyzing a very specific action. And what Tom Myers said is, imagine that the skeleton was denuded of all the given muscle. What would that single muscle do to the skeleton acting on its own, right? And that's what would be the single muscle theory. In other words, what would that one muscle, right? So here you've got the bicep and it moves a certain way. What does that one muscle do? So the biceps will be defined as a radio-ulnar supinator, an elbow flexor, a weak flexor of the shoulder. But the anatomy trains perspective is much more global, which is why I think this is such a great thing for chiropractic. In the anatomy trains view, additional information is added to this. The biceps brachii is an element in a continuous fascial plane or myofascial meridian, which runs from the outside of the thumb to the fourth rib and beyond. Now, this doesn't negate the first, as he's saying. It doesn't negate the fact that we're a arm flexor, but what it does is it shows that there's stabilization of the thumb, keeping the chest open, helping breathing. There's so many other pieces to this. And the reason why I think this is so important for chiropractic is because, when you're adjusting a child, you're not just adjusting an atlas, right? You might be touching an atlas, you might be touching a sacrum, you might be touching a T4, but you're really doing a lot more because there's so much more that's going on. And that's what we're going to keep on talking about. And what he talks about, Mr. Myers, and you'll see in a couple of minutes when we pull on his video, is whole body communicating networks. Central to this new anatomy trains map is the functional unity of the connective tissue system. And what he talks about is that there are three major networks in which you've stripped everything else away, you still see an outline of the body. And that's the vascular system, the connective tissue system, or the fascial system, and I love it that he puts it right here in his own book, the neural net. So, and this is a picture on the right-hand side of what the neural net would look like if you took all the muscle, all the bone, everything else away, and just had the neural net left. And he was very big into the whole idea of tensegrity. Tensegrity is instead of what we know of as our system being like bones, like constructed around muscles, it's a whole system that interconnects. Because if you actually took our bones out and you stacked them, they would just collapse on the floor, right? And if you took our muscles out, they would just collapse on the floor. So there's a lot more to what we are. And what he is suggesting is that the bones in our body actually have a pushing out force. And the fascia that connects the bones, which surrounds the muscles, which surrounds the organs, which surrounds our brain and the dura mater, though the fascia pulls in. So this way, it kind of works together. It works together. And it's not that the biceps brachii or moves in one particular direction. Is that when we move like this, everything is moving. When we move like this, the brain is telling it to move. We move like this, the nerves are working, the blood vessels are working. It's all together. It's not just this little separate entity. Like he says here, take the muscles away and the skeleton is anything but stable. Take the soft tissue away and the bones will clatter to the floor. The bones and cartilage are clearly compression resisting struts that push outward against the myofascial net. The net in turn is always tensional, always trying to pull inward towards the center. Both elements are necessary for stability and contribute to practical mobility. And this is why it's so important for us to understand this with pediatrics, because with pediatrics, when we are adjusting this child, especially kids who are neurodivergent, which is what we've seen a lot of, when we have a child who's neurodivergent and we're adjusting them, you can adjust an atlas, and you can especially like if you do stuff like network, you can adjust an atlas and watch their feet move. You can adjust their sacrum and watch them arch their head back like this. Now, how is that happening? It's because it's all connected. And there are 6 main anatomy trains, which Mr. Myers will talk about. But what I want to just kind of preface before we bring this out is the brilliance of taking this concept from the thought process of everything is separate. We have a separate muscle here and a separate bone there, and putting it all together. And now I'm going to bring on Mr. Tom Myers, author of Anatomy Trains.
Physiotherapy and rehab in particular, chiropractic, osteopathic, and others, more generally, have gone under the Newtonian laws of force and motion. And that's how we thought of biomechanics, and that's why we came up with the musculoskeletal system. And by using the laws of mechanics, which, by the way, was published in 1687 by Borelli, the guy who did the leverage biomechanics that we've been working on for the last 400 years. And given that we now have systems theory now, given that we have game theory, given that we have cybernetics, it really was time for an update on this. And I was teaching anatomy, just everybody else does, to students at the Rolfe Institute, because my primary teacher was Ida Rolfe, and so I was teaching for her institute. But all the anatomies are this muscle and origin and insertion, and I was looking for a way to open this up to people. There's a skeletal framework, and I hope I'm speaking legibly to your chiropractic friends. The idea that there is a skeletal framework that would stand up on its own, and therefore individual muscles like the deltoid is responsible for abduction because it's approximating the two origin and insertion of the muscle, just was inadequate to the task of analyzing complicated rehabilitation problems, complicated postural problems, or injuries that had metastasized, so to speak, had distributed themselves through the thing. So I think that my model, it's not that Anatomy Trains is a replacement for origin insertion. It is, I think, a good addition. And I think there'll be other ways of looking at the connections through the body. Anatomy Trains is one.
And I think that your concept of utilizing tensegrity, like Buckminster Fuller came about, really fits into that kind of model where everything is connected to everything kind of stuff. So would you expand on that?
Yeah, this is true of most tension-dependent systems. In having to move where the interview is, I don't have my tensegrity structures here to show you, but sure you can put one up or something. The idea is we're used to continuous compression structures. Our houses are continuous compression structure. One brick on top of the other, and you can go as high as whatever that tower is in Dubai. But we're not continuous compression, but we've been acting as if the head sits on the atlas, and the head in the atlas sits on the axis, and the head in the axis sit on C3 all the way down to L5, hooking on to the sacral table, and that all comes down to our feet, and then the muscles move that frame around. And it's just not the way it is. If you take the muscles, if you take a soft tissue off the skeleton, it will clatter to the floor, and we'll have a hard time putting it back together. Even if you put the ligaments on it, you could probably lean it in a corner if you jam the knees back into hyperextension, but a skeleton, even with the ligaments, won't stand. It is the interaction between the myofascia, the ligamentous bed, and the skeleton that make this thing stand up. And so then when you get to that understanding, you realize, oh, the bones are pushing out against an elastic that's pulling in. All our cells are balloons, and we are a balloon, and the skin and the fascia underneath the skin and the muscles underneath the fascia are all trying to pull in, and the skeleton is sitting there resisting that pulling in. Well, if you get more pulling, can I be seen here? Yeah, if you get more pulling on the front, then the skeleton gets pulled into here, and this is imbalanced. You can say this is imbalanced if you want. It's not ideal balance, but it's balanced. It's balanced in between the pushing out of the skeleton and the pulling in of the muscles. It's just that our psychology makes that a really interesting process.
Yes, brilliant, brilliant. I love it. And one of the things you also said in chapter 10 of your latest fourth edition of Anatomy Trains.
My God, you actually read it. I can't tell you how many people come up to me on the circuit and say, I have your book, which means I haven't read it.
On the shelf.
It's on the shelf, yes.
Oh,
I looked at it and there were too many words.
Show me the pictures. I love the concept of the KQ, right? Because we all know about IQ, right? And EQ is the latest buzzword, but KQ with movement literacy. That was so important, especially like now we're going to delve more into pediatrics, especially with pediatrics, to kind of talk about how we can help install or instill more KQ and movement literacy into a pediatric population.
So much of our therapeutic world, excuse me, let me start that again. So much of our therapeutic world is based on lack. You are not aligned. You are not your full self. You don't have the energy that everybody seems to have on Facebook. All of that stuff comes in along with advertising to give us a terrible image of ourselves. And I'm really dedicated, and that sounds like Disruptive Pediatrics is dedicated to not letting people get to 40 years old where they're kind of half broken down. And I'm not going to say anything about nutrition because I eat anything. So I don't have anything to say about nutrition. Psychological health, I might have something to say about that, but probably nobody should listen to me because I have no expertise. However, movement hygiene is something that we have not. I don't know if you're old enough. I remember President Kennedy's Council on Physical Fitness in the 1960s. We've been periodically trying to get the populace more active. And that's great to get more active. I would go for a different thing, and that would be movement hygiene, that you have the vocabulary. If you're talking about kinesthetic intelligence, any intelligence requires a vocabulary. We need to have a language of movement for our children that isn't necessarily about them being athletically wonderful, because that's where the only money is. There's no money for music anymore. Music is a physical skill. There's no money for dance anymore. Dance is a physical skill. There's no money for art anymore. Art is a physical skill, etc., etc. All the physical skills are being taken out of school. On top of that, you're driving there in a bus and you're spending most of your time on a screen.
Another thing that I've seen a lot with these kids on the spectrum especially is they have what I call a defensive posture, so that they're often like this, shoulder high on one side, hip high on the other side, head is pitched forward, eyes are kind of squinting. So it's almost as if they're being attacked, even though they're not being attacked, right? But they're in this attack defense kind of posture. And speaking through the anatomy trains, what do you think is happening in that kind of thing? And how could chiropractors, using the concepts of anatomy trains, look at that differently?
Well, you don't want anybody to be stuck in a pattern. So people get stuck in patterns because they don't complete an experience. An experience consists of a sensation, and then you have a feeling about that sensation, mammalian brain, and then you order that into your world, more monkey brain, and then you move. And trauma can be described as getting stuck somewhere along that chain. Many people get stuck between the concept and the movement. In other words, they're holding back a movement. So the first thing that I would say is I would look at these kids and say, what movement is not happening? What movement has not happened?
One last thing I want to kind of mention to you, you actually turned me on to this book too, The Architecture of Human Living Fascia by Jean-Claude Guimbardu. I hope I said that right. How does your work in anatomy trains, and I know how it does, but how does it work with this book, and how did you kind of get the idea to look into his work and put it together with yours?
I was introduced to fascia by Ida Rolf in 1973 was when I first heard that word. I've evolved that work from her, and she was in fascia, so we were all looking at fascia. I was involved with a man named Jim Oshman who wrote Energy Medicine, and he, at Ida Rolf's request, did a literature search on fascia and came up with such amazing stuff that kept me going for a while. And it wasn't until 2007 that we had the first Fascial Research Congress, and that brought scientists and practitioners together, chiropractors, osteopaths, lots and lots of people like us. And so we've learned a great deal about the fascia since, and it was there that I learned about Gamberto's work, saw his films. I've been over to Bordeaux where he works. I've been in his surgery, and when we first learned about fascia from Ida Rolf, it was the tough, sinewy, like the tape you see at the post office, full of fiber. And that's the model that we were working on. And Ida Rolf actually said, well, you should be looking at these gels at the ground substance, as we called it then. And because she was a chemist, I'm not a chemist, she was a chemist. And it turns out that the really interesting stuff, of course, collagen, elastin, and reticulin and the rest are interesting, but the responsibility for what goes on in the tissue is more with the keratin, chondroitin, hyaluronan, all of these, heparin, laminin, there's 150 of them now, I think, of what you could call an adhesome. What holds us together? So we are held together by an adhesome of these 150 chemicals that are tying our cells together. And cells have cell junctions that tie them together on a local basis, but to tie your body together so that you are recognizable today from our phone call yesterday, things have to stay pretty much in the same shape. And that is really the responsibility of the fibroblasts and who garden the fascial system for us. Finally, I would just say that we have a lot of chiropractors who've either come to take this not because they're actually going to do the manipulations that we do, but to be able to see the way we do into that pattern. That's helpful. And otherwise, many chiropractors have soft tissue workers to supplement their practice so that they do the HVLA thrusts and somebody else is doing soft tissue work to go along with it. And so I would urge them to think about somebody who is anatomy trained to have an assist there, because they'll be looking much more at the global pattern rather than at this local, why this supraspinatus is not working. That supraspinatus is not working because the levator scapulae that's in an anatomy train with it isn't working, and it isn't working because the head's forward. And you can actually get to the place where you have a much more functioning, sensitive, responsive and resilient system. At least I think so. If we combine forces, we could afford the ignorance about how the human system works in terms of movement, because the environment required movement.
Yes.
The Paleolithic environment required movement. The agricultural environment, the agricultural world that we've been in for the last 10,000 years or so, required movement. Even the industrial world, although we had Laban and other people in the industrial era, because people were doing repetitive movements again and again and again, and not the kind of movement that would promote health. So now we are in a place where people are sitting so much in front of a screen so much that movement is now rapidly becoming an emergency. I think you and I are early bell ringers of this particular emergency, and but I absolutely, in 50 years, when the metaverse is going, how you occupy your body and how you use your body in a way to keep your mind healthy in the metaverse is going to be an actual challenge for the next generation.
Yes, you had said in one of your lectures that I watched that the world doesn't require us to move anymore, and that's exactly what you and I are trying to combat, whether it's in kids or adults or athletes or anybody in between. So thank you once again, Tom Myers, for joining us today. This was really, really, really interesting, and just confirms why I have been so enthusiastically teaching about anatomy trains over the last 10 years or so. So thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Dr. Rubin, it's been a pleasure. Take care. Thanks to everybody.
So
Therapy and
hold on.
rehab in particular.
Sorry. There we go. One of the books that I mentioned there, and Mr. Myers commented on, was this another amazing book. So I personally think you guys got to get two books on Amazon here. Is The Anatomy Trains, 4th edition, latest one that just came out, and this one, The Architecture of Human Living Fascia. Because what, I don't know if you've ever seen, like maybe take a look at something called Strolling Under the Skin that Jean-Claude Guimaudoux did 20, 30 years ago. And what he did is, he's a surgeon in Europe, and what he did is he actually took a probe with people's permission and went underneath the skin to see what was really happening. And our fascia is actually a living thing, and our movements, when you look at the movements of the fascia and the muscles, they're asking the people to move and stuff, and you look at it actually as this actually happening, you'll see this myriad of these like octahedron, tetrahedron sort of shapes kind of moving and twisting and bending, and as Mr. Myers was talking about, what we used to think of when we did dissection years and years and years ago in anatomy labs back at Life University in the 80s, fascia is just something you cut away, right? Just get rid of this. But it's actually this brilliantly interlaced thing that slides and lives and surrounds things. And this is what it's making me think about. This is like why I wanted to bring this to you guys, because I have this hypothesis that the brain, spine, and nerve system are way more complicated than we currently think. Just like they are delving into the fascia now, and they have like neurofascia and craniofascia, and they're figuring that fascia is such an important part of our bodies. I think that now, obviously, they've been studying the brain forever, and they now have MRIs, like standard MRIs of every age group and stuff. But I think that there's more. I think that there's more to the brain, spine, and the nerve system. And I think that more is why chiropractic is so successful. We just haven't figured it out yet. Because yes, you could say, because I've seen with Dr. Four in some activator seminars, I've seen, when you adjust with an activator, or probably with any other kind of adjustment, that the brain lights up, right? And I know Heidi Harvick is doing the same kind of research. The prefrontal cortex is so important with the brain, but maybe there's more to the brain and the spine and the nerves than we think. So like when Jean-Claude Guimaudoux put that probe into the skin and looked at the fascia, and he saw, wow, this is not what we thought of it. It's not just this surface that's just sitting there like a TheraBand. It's so much more than that. Maybe there's more to the brain, spine, and nerve system than we think too. Maybe that's why we are so successful as a chiropractor, is because of what we do. So I want us to think about that. And I want us to think about it like this. I saw this video. Someone was opening up a grapefruit or an orange. And this is what it's like. So when you look at the outside of an orange, it looks like one way. And then you open it up, you have layer after layer after layer after layer after layer. That is what I think the nerve system is like. I don't think it is the way we think it is. I think there's so much more. And that is why chiropractors, especially pediatric chiropractors, is so successful. Because what they're talking about is that fascia is alive. Fascia is plastic. Just like there's neuroplasticity, there's now something called fascial plasticity. And I'm beginning to think, as I've been doing this now for 33 years, that the brain and nerve system and the fascial system are having a lot to do together, and we just haven't kind of pieced it out yet. And what I'd love to add, I'm asking you guys out there, my listeners, is if you have some thoughts about this, please contact us. Either contact through ChiroSecure, you can email me at rubinchiropractic@gmail.com. You can Facebook me on Rubin Family Chiropractic, or Instagram me. I would love to hear your thoughts about this, because I feel that there is so much more for us to uncover, and that uncovering is going to bring us to the next place. Because like, if you think about this, this is one of the people that are responsible for fascia being such a big study today, is that Their work relates to the innervation of fascia, and fascia has a direct connection with the autonomic nerve system. So if that is true, we've been talking about the polyvagal theory for the last 10 years or so. And I spoke with Dr. Porges recently that you probably have seen. If you can understand that the fascia plays a role in the autonomic nerve system, that means it's the part of the vagus nerve has role with the fascia too. Wow. To me, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I think about the depth with which chiropractic is and has not really 100% been explored, it gets me excited. It gets me thrilled to think of what can be coming next. So if you want to hear more stuff like this, we got this amazing podcast. I just published this morning my 465th episode. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. I mentioned the polyvagal seminar I did with Dr. Porges recently. This is, if you want to click here or use your QR code to click there, you can click into it. We've had a lot of positive feedback from this seminar, and I'm trying to start building more seminars with the Polyvagal Institute so we can really create a great connection between us and other professions that have the same mindset. I am a speaker for the ICPA, so I'd love for you to join us. This is the link to our lectures on the ICPA. I'm one of the main speakers. And we also, I am going to be doing the first ever tongue tie, or what we're calling pediatric midline defect seminars in September, on September 17th. So click on the link if you're interested in getting more information. And as I always end all my ChiroSecure talks, I love Under Armour. I wear Under Armour quite a bit. And I love that saying is protect this house. And to me, the most important thing we need to do is to protect our future is to adjust more kids. We've got to get out there and adjust more kids. Tom Myers made me think so much about how is it, so I talked about that defensive posture, how is it that that child's not just brain and nerve system, but how is their fascia being interrupted because of the subluxation process? So let's go, we're done with the slides. Let's go back to the full screen. What I'm asking you guys to think about is help me help the kids. Help me figure out what we need to do with our kids, because our kids are our future. Our kids are the ones who we really need to focus on. There's an urgent issue in the last couple of months with the shootings in Uvalde at the elementary school or the high school, and the shootings in Buffalo, and the shootings at that 4th of July parade. I mean, we have got to help our kids, because who are the people doing this, right? We have got to get out there. We've got to protect our kids. How can we get to our kids? It is up to us. It is up to us to take care of the kids. Thank you so much, ChiroSecure, for having me on this. If you want to talk more about what we've talked about, check out Tom Myers' book, Anatomy Trains. Check out Jean-Claude Guibardoux's book, An Architecture of the Human Living Fascia. Find me on Facebook at Rubin Chiropractic, Rubin Family Chiropractic. Email me at rubinchiropractic@gmail.com. I love to have a conversation. I love to get more people involved in this kind of work, because between what we are doing and what ChiroSecure is trying to do to reach out to the masses about pediatrics, with myself and Monica Berger and Erica Kwalke, I think this is we've got to secure our future, and the future is our kids. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your attention. God bless, and we'll see you next time.
Today's Pediatrics show, Look to the Children, was brought to you by ChiroSecure.